morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 33rd episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco and Gaia, the platinum sponsors of Five for Breakfast. In Washington, the House and Senate remain in recess until September 2nd. Upon their return, Congress will be working to finalize the remaining appropriation bills ahead of the October 1 deadline to prevent a potential government shutdown. At NTIA, all 56 eligible entities have been cleared to proceed to the BEAD benefit of the bargain stage. Last week, we saw Virginia and Louisiana were the first states to publish their final proposals for public comment. With respect to USF reform, the bipartisan bicameral USF working group led by key Senate and House leaders is inviting public feedback on how to modernize and strengthen the program. The comment portal will be closed at midnight on Monday, September 15th, and the Fiber Broadband Association will be filing comments and will engage our members for input. Next week, we're heading up to Canada for our next North American Fiber Connect workshop in Toronto on Tuesday, August 19th. Registration has been incredibly strong, so we've actually had to add a ballroom to make room for all the attendees. So it's really exciting to see how much interest Canada has in our Fiber Connect workshop. After Toronto, we'll be in Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll end the year in our premier member meeting in Palm Springs on December 8th and 9th. So we hope we see you guys at one or many of those workshops. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Bill Baker, the CEO and owner of Nextlink, to discuss fiber and fixed wireless, a winning combination for Nextlink. But before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from the team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few housekeeping items, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsors of Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco and Gaia. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please use the question box, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen, and we will have a Q&A session with our panelists during today's discussion. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We appreciate your response and your input. And with that, I will hand things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David. And good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was Andrew Butcher, the President of the Maine Connectivity Authority, to discuss driving connections, local lessons from the road to broadband expansion. And, I really love speaking with our state broadband directors, as they are all so invested in ensuring every home and business is connected in their state. Andrew shared with us his journey across the state of Maine in his vintage Volkswagen camper van, affectionately known as Buttercup, to speak with members of rural communities so that he and his office can have a personal connection with everyone they're trying to serve. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Bill Baker, the CEO and owner of Nextlink, to discuss fiber and fixed wireless, a winning combination for Nextlink. Nextlink was founded by Bill in North Texas in 2012 as a fixed wireless operator focused on the rural countryside. Over the last 13 years of operation, they have evolved operations to over 12 states in central U.S. and over 100,000 subscribers, providing fixed wireless, fiber, voice over IP, and more recently, mobile services. Nextlink is relatively well known as well in the rural subsidy world, going back to the Connect America Fund to reverse auction, and through RDOF and various state broadband grant programs. And now we see in the recent public announcements with Louisiana BEAD results, a preliminary BEAD recipient. Prior to joining Nextlink, Bill was a senior partner at KPMG's deal advisory practice, where he assisted corporate and private equity clients with mergers and acquisitions. Bill has also served in management roles in small, high-growth startups early in his career, as well as corporate development roles in a Fortune 100 company. Bill holds degrees in accounting and an MBA in finance from Baylor University and is a licensed CPA in the state of Texas. Welcome, Bill. And for our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we will work them into discussion. So with that, let's just start, Bill. I know you started, Nextlink way back in 2012. Tell us about Nextlink.
That's a lifetime ago in the telecom world, Gary.
In the hype cycle, Einstein likes to say, time is the distance between events. And we certainly are having a lot of events since 2012. The world has really changed and changing big world now. Can you discuss, how you got started and a little bit about your business model?
Sure. I mean, I actually, when we started this business in 2012, had a partner, good college buddy from Baylor, Danny Gilbert. He'd been in the business, run a WISP, sold it to and maybe I shouldn't say this, but sold it to a private equity backed roll up and hated it. Kind of guy that really shouldn't ever have a boss. He should be his own boss. And he goes, "Hey, if I go back out on my own, would you back me?" And I thought they had a great business. And so I was his primary investor. And unfortunately, the story does take a sad turn. Danny died of cancer in 2012, immediately after we started the business. And so I'm a partner at KPMG. I sort of inherited this WISP, but everybody knew what they needed to do. So I just sort of stuck with it and quickly learned the business model. And the first thing I learned in year one is you don't want to own a mom and pop, own your job kind of business as an investor. That's not really, and certainly not in the ISP business. This is a business that must be scaled. And so I just really focused on running the business and getting to scale. And that's obviously part of our long-term strategy is getting to that sort of a more manageable scale. I don't know that I could tell you in 2012 and 13 when I was going, I need to scale this business, that I want to get over 100,000 subscribers over 12 states and participate in these FCC grant programs and everything. People would have told me I'm crazy, but nevertheless, here we are, and we're now going through the BEAD journey. I guess you could say, probably not as sexy as riding Buttercup through the Maine countryside, but it probably will have as many potholes in the road along the way. That's for sure. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's really fortunate that you came from KPMG and kind of, when I would teach entrepreneurship, my students' business plans would be all lifestyle business. I'm like, you have to think big and scale, because really things only work in giant scale is where you really see the kind of the network effects and the multiplier effect. And really, it's just so funny. If you don't go for the swing for the fences, it's really hard to make it when
and especially in this business, whether you're on the fiber end of the spectrum of delivery or you're in the fixed wireless side, purchasing power is critical on the deployment side. If you don't have any purchasing power on what you're putting into a home with a router or an ONT or whether it's fixed wireless gear on a tower or leasing a tower from one of the national tower guys, it's really tough to be an operator in this business. And so, and honestly, at 100,000 subs, we fundamentally don't really have scale. And I think we're starting to see now, in the broader broadband market, you're starting to see a lot of mergers happen. I expect we're about to enter into a consolidation period here, especially as the financial markets are certainly a little bit more receptive, and the FTC is a little bit more receptive to transactions. We just saw, Ziply trade hands and lots of small deals.
Well, even big deals. Frontier, Verizon, Lumen selling their, residential broadband business to AT&T. Just the regular cycle. That's when we built our business case and kind of 5-year plan. We said, hey, we're in the beginning of the largest investment cycle in fiber in history. And what happens is, first the money flows, and then you start to see market consolidation. It's just a natural cycle. And so we are at the beginning of that. I think another key indicator, as you mentioned, private equity, and that's why you have to be at scale, is private equity for broadband expansion has, in the first 6 months of the year, raised more money than all of last year combined. And so, and I saw a lot, talked to a lot of our ISP members, at Fiber Connect in Nashville, and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to bid in the next round of BEAD because I have so much access to private equity and private capital. Why would I, chase chiclets is the way that they would phrase it. But you have been successful. So first thing out of the box, we saw that Louisiana was the first one out initially with their final proposal, and then they and Virginia came out last week, and you guys had quite an uplift. You had tentatively won 5.3 million in the first round, or first time that Louisiana had their final proposal, and now you've over tripled that at 18.5 million, and pretty much tripled the locations. You're up to 7,460 locations. Can you talk a little bit about what was different between, the previous administration and, the way the Louisiana ran that round and what you are now, and why you guys end up with more share?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, we just felt like, honestly, for us, each state varies a little bit in terms of our deployment strategy. For us in Louisiana, that's a fixed wireless market. And we just felt like the rules were a little bit more conducive to a licensed fixed wireless win in the state. So a lot of the reason we won more is we bid a little bit more broadly than we did in the original round. So we won what we won in the original round, and then we sort of spread our legs a little bit and picked up a little bit more. Would we have won that in round one if we had bid it? I can't say. But so it's hard to tell how much Louisiana changed versus the bidding changed and the bidders changed from round one to round two. I mean, certainly from, the data at 86% fiber, I believe is the number, Gary, hold me to that. But, I wouldn't say the outcome was radically different, but certainly the bidding was meaningfully different. Just from, you can look at the award values. I think they went down from approximately 750 to $500 million. And yet they're still at 86% fiber. So if they shaved off some of the really high cost locations, I think that's probably in combination with some more aggressive bidding. And in particular, what we seem to be observing is more aggressive price bids from Leo, as now you sort of have a Starlink versus Kuiper fight for the Leo win in the markets. And so I think that's meaningfully changed those location values.
Well, I mean, certainly Vineeth and Thomas and the governor, they're all big fiber guys and wanted to get as much fiber out as possible. And yeah, initially they had a little over 95% fiber. This round on locations, they were at 80%, but 91% of the funding went to fiber. So, the way the original NTIA waterfall is fiber to everywhere you can, and then fixed wireless, and then you looked at alternative technologies, and that made a lot of sense because we're building out critical infrastructure. And people accuse me, and I think even your CTO accused me of that. I'm biased against fixed wireless, which
no, Gary, say that's not true.
Yeah, it's in. Luckily, I'm a huge Claude Aiken fan, so. And Claude's been a great FBA member. He's on our policy team, and obviously super smart, and especially on the policy side. But what we really want is, you got to build out the middle mile, and you got to get the critical infrastructure. And what's great about fixed wireless is if you can't get fiber all the way to the home, you can get fiber all the way to line of sight of the home. And so you have the fiber for AI data centers. You do have the fiber for smart grid modernization. You do have the fiber for being able to put more cell towers. I was just at our lake house, and I couldn't get a signal until I hit 95 trying to get home Sunday. So the fact that fixed wireless can get fiber to almost all the way is a big benefit, versus Starlink. I always think it's so odd that everybody's served by Starlink because it's a satellite in the sky. Yet it's considered unserved until you give them money, and then it's served. So
yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I could go off on a tangent for quite a long time about Leo in general and LEO and BEAD. But to your point, it's in the definition of insanity to create a policy where you say that product doesn't cover them today, so we're going to, but it does, but we're going to pay them to do what they already do. And I think the saddest part about any meeting, I think there is a right product for the right location. There's a right tool for every situation. There's places where fiber makes the most sense, places where fixed wireless makes the most sense, and there's places where LEO makes the most sense. But the one thing about LEO that is unequivocal is, and I try and tell this to broadband offices, and some get it, and honestly, some do not, is this is the Infrastructure Act. There is zero infrastructure being deployed if you award LEO. If somebody that is like the only bidder, absolutely. But to your point, licensed fixed wireless or unlicensed fixed wireless, they're using middle mile. They're using existing tower assets, or they're deploying tower assets. That's creating property in the state that generates property taxes. You're creating jobs. You got install, you got maintenance. You're creating economic activity when you award a broadband grant to either a wireline or a wireless operator. You are doing none of that when you award it to LEO. And so, like I said, there's places where it's appropriate, but it truly, I mean, combination of sadness and anger when I see some states have literally designated LEO as a priority technology option in their state. And I just don't think they understand, and they've received poor advice from their outside consultants.
Yeah, I don't know under any possible definition where LEO would fit the definition for a priority broadband project. You know, I was just down in Buenos Aires last week at our LATAM Fiber Connect event, and you know, they rolled out the research firm that we use down there rolled out, and fiber's dominant technology, taking a market share, and you know, DSL's dying, cable's dying, and fixed wireless is low market share, but it's growing a little bit. And I asked, well, what about LEO? And they looked at me like I was crazy, like, well, that's not critical infrastructure. And the same thing went on in Europe. So we're in this alternative reality where all this pressure to deploy LEO. And I think that you know, when people say, you know, use the analogy of it's like a generator in commercial power, you know, in a hurricane, you know, it's really life-saving to have a generator, but you wouldn't want to run your daily business or home off a generator when you have real power available. Same thing. So it's great when, you know, like in Asheville or Ukraine or on a boat or in a plane or whatever, but to do what I'm doing, I'm day one of Live Oak Fiber here, 5 gig symmetric at my house. So I'm excited. So let's talking about fiber. Talk us to your evolution. So you started solely as a fixed wireless provider.
Yeah, I mean, we started as unlicensed fixed wireless, which, you know, honestly was predominantly the product of choice for WISPs in the teens, utilizing 5 gigahertz unlicensed. And, you know, we grew up to about 20,000 subs over multiple states. And then we participated in the CAF2 program and, you know, won a large obligation across 6 states. And that program back in the teens, to refresh folks' memory, you know, that was back in the day when literally up to that point, the definition of broadband was 10/1. And it just jumped to 25/3 at the CAF2 award. And we were a mix of 100 by 20 and 25/3 obligation back in that era. And we were deploying predominantly 5 gigahertz, but, you know, we've sort of evolved. We were a very large buyer of CBRS spectrum across the US. I own over 1,100 county licenses. So predominantly today, our subscriber base is served with CBRS technology. Overwhelmingly, Tirana, CBRS, we're the largest operator of Tirana a year in total by sub count, and certainly within the license spectrum of 3 gigahertz. So we get tremendous performance through trees at distance. We're currently rolling out their G2 product, which is a hybrid bonded product utilizing both 6 gigahertz and CBRS spectrum. We're doing gigabit wireless over 5 miles, and we're doing 100 meg service over 12 miles. So, out in a rural, low density area, tremendous performance, relative to, Leo, if you will, because that is a competitive point that we certainly are mindful of. And so, we've sort of evolved into really an old unlicensed shop to really a licensed fixed wireless shop through the years, and also started to evolve into fiber to the home in the small communities that we serve. So we'll probably finish 26 with over 30 communities and over 100,000 fiber passings. Today, we're just under 20,000 fiber subs. And honestly, that we're growing faster on the sub side on the fiber product.
Well, certainly, you mentioned start off talking about market consolidation and obviously valuation. And what I'm witnessing is the first thing when anybody's looking to either acquire or be acquired, the tire kickers come out and look at the assets, and having fiber infrastructure certainly is very accretive on valuation. Kind of what is your thought there?
Oh, I mean, most definitely there's the market values of fiber sub differently than a fixed wireless sub. And there's a level of infrastructure investment. My deployment costs to create passings, if you will, is radically lower than a fiber deployment. But also generally speaking, I'm deploying fixed wireless in areas where fiber doesn't exist. In low density rural countryside. I'm not necessarily attacking metro markets or communities where even though I may have gigabit wireless, I'm not necessarily moving into communities as my core strategy to compete against fiber. I do well in those markets that are cable and DSL still and not fiber. But, honestly, in those communities, which are now becoming very few and far between, I look to ultimately fiber those, if not others. And honestly, I'm moving into the small rural communities. I'm not moving up into what I would call the 100,000 and higher pop type county seats and larger communities. I'm the rural guy, if you will.
So one of your customers here has chimed in saying he's super satisfied with Nextlink fixed wireless in rural Texas. Wanted to know your perspective on Starlink and the state funding for fiber deployment, and is there a watermark for cost per home pass that will drive funding to Starlink over fiber, and kind of what's that price point?
Well, I think fundamentally this gets back to the priority technology for those that aren't familiar with how BEAD is in theory supposed to work. And I say in theory because it seems like people have different flavors of BEAD rules. But fundamentally, if a state does not designate LEO as priority technology, that's the backup choice. And so whatever gets designated as priority technology, and now it varies based on project area, but if fiber is the only priority technology, fiber is going to win unless the best fiber price is extraordinarily high and rejected by the state or the NTIA. If licensed fixed wireless is also deemed priority technology, it is going to compete favorably against fiber. And you may have seen a little bit of that, Gary, in the Louisiana outcome. We don't know that for sure, but it could have been a small impact. But if say, for instance, licensed fixed wireless and or fiber are competing against LEO because the state designated LEO as priority technology, I think we're seeing LEO price in the new BEAD program at sub $1,000 for a reference point. I have definitely put in some bids across the U.S. In BEAD below $1,000 a passing, unequivocally. That would compete very favorably against what we're observing from LEO in BEAD. Obviously, I don't have visibility into every LEO bid, but generally speaking, it looks like they've come down under 1,000. this round. So, that sort of becomes a little bit of the price point. And we'll see. It really comes down to, what is the state designating LEO as? Is it priority? Is licensed fixed wireless priority? Is that priority designation sort of makes you or breaks you?
So when you look at Louisiana, which is definitely pro-fiber, big fiber state, there.
I think fundamentally, though, Gary, in my opinion, every state is pro-fiber.
Exactly.
I think honestly, the bigger sort of swing element is, how much does every state want to tip the scales between licensed fixed wireless and LEO in those areas where fiber doesn't necessarily make economic sense? Like,
Well, certainly,
people have different definition of what economic sense is.
yeah.
20,000 a passing economic sense? Is 50,000 a passing for a fiber deployment make economic sense? That's a whole, people wouldn't debate that till they're blue in the face. That's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
But there is a number at which it doesn't make sense anymore. And that's where then you get into the LEO versus licensed fixed wireless debate, I think. And some states are definitely way more pro LEO than others. I mean, there's one state that I'm not going to name because I don't want any retribution. But honestly, they're so pro LEO, they are going to squeeze out fiber, and they're going to squeeze out licensed fixed wireless, and they are going to give a tremendous percentage of the state passings to LEO for reasons that I cannot fathom, understand. But that's what that broadband office is going to do.
I was going to say, like Louisiana's easy. They have to worry about weather on the Gulf Coast and stuff like that. So buried fiber is easy to do in Louisiana for relatively easy.
And also, Louisiana's got relatively decent population density. I mean, people think of Louisiana as somewhat of a rural state. I mean, you want to get rural? I mean, go Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota. I mean, even Nebraska, Kansas. Those are way more rural and low pop density than Louisiana. I mean, obviously, Texas is a state that has tremendous variation in population density from the west side to the east side. But that's where you just get into, well, what is the mentality of that state's broadband office and how they look at LEO and how it fits into the BEAD program? And, I think Vineeth and Thomas and those guys, shot it right down the middle of the road. It's 86% fiber. I don't know what the breakdown is on between licensed and fixed wireless, but it's a general split of the remaining 14.
My math came out that SpaceX or LEO went from 2% in the original final proposal to 9%. So I think it took market share away from and cable did really well. Cable was at 5%. So
yeah, and I think that's a lot of reflection on a squeeze on the high cost locations, which is reflected by the amount of dollars they're allocating out dropping radically.
Well, listen, Bill, so great to have you. I love your team, and congratulations on your success. What do you think is kind of the future for Nextlink over the next 5 years?
Well, we got to see where BEAD shakes out. I mean, we're certainly, we have. I think when we won CAF 2 in 17, the auction happened, 18. People go, who's this little guy in Texas? He's never going to be able to do this. We have completed 5 of our 6 states for CAF 2. Somebody's always got to be last. We'll finish our 6th state in full deployment here like this quarter. We've already been certified across most of our states by the FCC is complete. We're halfway through RDOF deployment now, and that'll wrap up. So we got a tremendous amount more deployment coming for RDOF. We're doing fiber in a ton of communities in Texas right now, as well as Nebraska, also Iowa. So, and now we're about to find out what happens in BEAD. I'm obviously, as you referenced me, I'm sort of known for playing in the grant world. We've got a lot of BEAD bids out there. We'll see how the other states shake out where we bid in, and we're hopeful. We're committed to rural communities and the rural countryside, or those are the folks we serve. We're very focused on that and quality of service and the customer experience. And that's sort of been the keys to our success to grow the business.
Well, congratulations on your Net Promoter Scores. You guys are one of the best. So
Thank you. Thank
we
you.
love seeing.
We take a lot of pride in that.
All right. Well, anyway, Bill, we just really appreciate your industry insights and all the great work that you and your team at Nextlink are doing to connect America with high-speed broadband. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday with Ed Barrett, the president of HR Green's Broadband Business Unit, to discuss grading America broadband, the findings of the 2025 report card for America's infrastructure. You're not going to want to miss that. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.